life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Bern, we've had, 75 shows now? And a host of callers, people wanting to know answers to a myriad of questions on all the shows we've talked about it, but it seems like one thing a lot of people have called in asking about is, who is Bern Moses? Who is this man? Where does he come from? Who does he think he is to be talking on the TV and giving us all this? And of course they love what we talk about, but I thought maybe we could spend a little time and kind of discuss where you came from, who you are, and why you feel like you have something to contribute.
Well, I'm not opposed to that. Actually, this evening and all subsequent evenings, every time I stand in front of a group and attempt to make a difference, I always recognize that it started seriously in 1955. I was stationed in San Diego, California, and the Navy lost my pay records. And most people aren't aware of this, but if the military loses your pay records, they just don't pay you. And they told me that it might take weeks, even months, to reconstruct the records or get them from Washington, D.C. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a challenge, and it became one. I was borrowing some money from Navy Relief, but it wasn't enough to maintain the standard of living that we were accustomed to. And so after a while, I began to look at the papers and make inquiries about a spare time job. And you know,
now, were you still having to work?
Oh yeah, they don't let you go home.
Oh, that's a wonderful.
Yeah, that's a good deal. Huh? But oh yeah, I still had to report in every day and what have you. But I did have an inordinate amount of free time. I have to admit that. And so I thought, well, maybe I could, get some spare time income. And I looked into papers, and like I say, I was asking for referrals, and these newspaper ads would say, like, make an extra $500 to $1,000 a month extra without interfering with your regular job. And it's the same figures they're using today. That's something that has to be looked at. Really, 1955, they were saying $500 to $1,000 extra a month. That's pretty good. And of course, when I went to them, they were all sales jobs. Yes. And I kept backing away because I wasn't prepared to do that, because I knew I couldn't sell. And my rationale for that, frankly, was that I stuttered so bad. I know we've talked about this before here, but I stuttered so bad I couldn't even say my name, let alone the products that were being sold. And I was extremely introverted. I had a quiet rage about me that would flare out at the most inopportune times, which came, I think, for years of mimicking, mocking, and cajoling from my peers and what have you, that created a lot of stress. Anyway, I wasn't cut out for it, and I kept walking away, and I think they were pleased because I didn't have the clothes to wear. I just wasn't prepared. One night there was a knock on the door, and there was a young fellow there, and turned out that he was selling Cutco, kitchen cutlery. We always received salespeople in our home. My mother and father always did that for the most part, and so I always had a habit of doing that, and I was delighted with what I saw, fell in love with the product, wanted to buy, but there was no way that I could rationally. And this young fellow suggested that I go to work for the company. And I explained to him that I couldn't sell, and he said, well, you don't really have to in this case because this product sells itself. Yeah. And I was naive enough to accept that because, frankly, he was terrible at what he was doing. Wasn't good at all, and I wanted to buy, and I thought maybe this is one of those kinds of products that could do that. And so I, agreed to meet him, and this was on a Thursday evening. He called on us on the weekend, but he agreed to meet on Thursday evening and almost didn't make it. Now, I know now, for example, over the years, when you invite people to meetings and what have you, that oftentimes they don't show, and I've isolated the fact that they've got a lot of things to process through in order to go into that other dark cave. You know what I mean? In other words, things keep coming up and people just don't make it. And subsequently, I found a lot of things to do and say that, encourages that, increases it. But that night, I worked through my resistances and my fears and anxieties, and I showed up at the building, And I walked by the office and took a glance in, and he wasn't there. And I turned around and walked back and looked in this way, and I never did see him. I mustered up enough courage to go in, hoping that he may be late or something, but I never did see that man again my whole lifetime. And I keep talking about him, and I hope maybe some way that he hears this over the airwaves. I've been looking for him because I want to give him a big hug and thank him for the gesture. And I don't know what his motivation was, whether it was to really assist me in getting an extra income, or maybe he was trying to win a steak knife, some kind of contest or whatever. But he did make the difference. I was inspired that evening. They were singing songs and yelling and having a great time, and there were some trophies being passed out, recognition being given, and I could see that it was happening. And I was pretty stimulated. And so when they invited me up Saturday, I agreed to come back. And that night, or that evening, they gave me a sales manual to read over, which I absorbed. I can remember sitting on the toilet stool, all night long reading that book. I was just totally fascinated by this idea.
What interested you the most?
That's the only place I could
find
go.
A salesman's brochure that interesting, Bern.
What's that? Well, it's just that it looked like the language in it and what they were up to could work, and I could make some money for my family.
So you saw a possibility for yourself.
Oh, yeah. I thought, well, I could do this. Anyway, I was supposed to go up Saturday for training, and I showed up. Another stimulating meeting. Couldn't get anybody to take me out. In other words, I thought it was the way I was dressed, or in fact I stuttered, and I understood. Turned out later that I realized that a lot of those fellows weren't going to go out to work. It's not untypical for people to go to a sales meeting, get all fired up.
And then...
Yeah, they go home, pick up their wife and go shopping, or go to a movie, or commiserate in the parking lot, or drive around the city. You know how that goes. But anyway...
Why is that?
Oh, it's fear. I mean, you get frozen up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was terrible. And I'm still subject to it. I have days when I just can't seem to get started, and I bet most salespeople do if they're honest about it. There are just times when life seems to rush in and freeze you up, and you wonder what you're doing, and it's pretty challenging. It's not like going to a regular job and accommodate everything that's happening. It's a whole different world. But anyway, the manager said, do you think you could sell this stuff? And what do you say? I mean, no. I go, sure. And he actually loaned me, I thought he was the greatest guy in the world, loaned me a sample kit and some extra free gifts to give away at the door, because it was a door-to-door kind of program. And boy, I couldn't wait to get started, and went down and stacked up the car, and got in and took down a pedometer reading, and I took off. Couldn't wait to get started, and I drove and looked for a good place to work, and couldn't wait to get started. Then I quit. And then I rehired. Then I rehired myself and quit again. Kept driving. Mm-hmm. 6 hours later, 189 city miles. Some of them creeping, some of them speeding. 189 city miles. I hadn't stopped the car.
Couldn't find that perfect block to start.
No, I remember one time. It got so bad that I got to a point where I promised myself that if I could find a yellow house with purple shutters, that I would stop and knock on that door. You know what I mean? And I found one, Gina.
You're kidding.
I couldn't believe it. And drove right by. I couldn't stop. I mean, who wants to knock on a yellow house with purple shutters? I mean, it's just craziness. I quit, and I was on my way home, knowing that my wife would pat me on the poo-poo and send me back with my sample kit, and that'd be the end of that sales career. And I was driving up University in San Diego, and I got angry. Don't know what, just ran into a rage. And I decided I was going to whip the car to a stop, and I was going to go over and knock on a door, and if they gave me any trouble, I'd knock their head off. Because I could do that. So I'd been a heavyweight boxing champion in the Navy and stuff. And I sublimated the anger, you know what I mean? And the next hour and a half, I got in, and the next hour and a half was the clumsiest, most inept, inadequate, embarrassing hour and a half of my life up to that point. And the guy did everything he could to assist me. In other words, he looked at the manual, he identified the blades, he helped me write the contract. But the thing of it is, he gave me a deposit. I walked out of that house, and I was a salesman. You know that feeling? Wow, this is terrific. Money in my pocket. Drove all the way home, about 20-minute drive, to tell my wife and get a bite to eat and celebrate. And then she had the audacity to suggest I do something. What do you suppose that was?
Go out again.
Go and get another one, like it was easy or something.
That's right.
Then I am driving around the city. I did manage to stop the car that day 4 times, intermittently, and I got 4 sales, and I knew that I had a product I could depend upon. It wasn't so. you still had to get there. You know what I mean? And you still had to be reasonably adept, and frankly, the next 2 years were horrendous. I have no idea why I even continued from a sales standpoint. I did have a knack, though, for recruiting people into the business and assisting them in getting started. I just had a knack for, I wouldn't call it sales management, but sales leadership and this type of thing. And that kept me alive in overrides. Well, in 1957, this was 2 years. I probably should draw it in a long way.
How long did it take to find your paychecks with the military?
Oh, it was about 7 months.
You're kidding.
Yeah. Now, I was borrowing some money from Navy Relief, which carried me a little bit, but yeah, it was a long time. But I got it all in a lump sum, was able to pay them back, and yeah, it was kind of a windfall, you know. Yeah, a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, 7 months. In 57, I was just a few months away from my expiration of enlistment. I really wanted to get out of the military and go full-time into the sales or business career. However, I had managed to get somewhere around 1,200th, plus or minus any given week or a month, out of 1,500 managers with Alcoa. Big company. And that wasn't enough to justify walking away from the military with its retirement and benefits and what have you. Mm-hmm. And there was an associate of mine, a strange man in a way, successful in direct selling, door-to-door, and yet one of the most grotesque people I've ever seen. I mean, he had a malady of some kind that he actually would frighten children. I mean, it was just horrible. Really? And yet somehow he had enough passion in him that he elicited compassion from people, and he was able to do quite well. I mean, just amazing. That was a lesson in itself. You know, that how can we disqualify ourselves from the free enterprise system when there are some people who are so ill-prepared can do so well? Mm-hmm. You know, he was an inspiration, actually. But he did have a lot of love in him, and he noticed my dilemma, and he said, "Vern, I want to introduce you to a couple of people that might help." And he took me to a store, and he bought me a recording. It was a 78 RPM by Earl Nightingale called The Strangest Secret. I know you've heard it, haven't you?
I've heard of it, but I don't know if I've listened to the...
Well, I'll make every effort to get you a copy. It's
That'd
awesome.
Be wonderful.
It's awesome. It was the first, quote, motivational record, talk record out, and it's still a bestseller. It's really doing a good job. Magnificent message, there was no question. He also bought me a book by Dr. Ben Sweetland called I Can, and that was stimulating. And in the 8 or 10 days, I was listening to the record and reading the book, and did both numbers of times, and found a lot of interesting information in there. It was at that point where I recognized that the spoken and written word could make a difference in a person's life. You know, I mean, just new ideas and the language and what have you could make a difference. But there was something that came to me during that period that was pretty fascinating. I recognized what I had been doing for the first quarter century of my life was reacting to circumstances. And
what made you realize that?
I don't know. It was kind of a collation from things I was reading in the book. And I look around my life today and I see 95, 97% of the people doing exactly the same thing, as unconsciously as I'd been doing it. In other words, it's our nature to accommodate. Okay? In other words, things present themselves and we handle it. But I wasn't causative. In other words, I recognized that I had been at effect. For example, when you're real young, a mother dresses you, tells you when to eat, when you can go out and play. Then you go to school and the teacher takes over, tells you when to color, you know, and when you're going to do arithmetic and when you're going to do English in recess. Then she sends you back to your mother who takes over again.
And don't you dare do anything without being told to do it. If you do it out of order or on your own initiative,
exactly.
50% of the time or more, it's the wrong thing to do, and it's inappropriate at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So we're conditioned, see, to react and to accommodate circumstances and people. And I recognized I really didn't have to do that anymore unless I chose to. That rather than reacting to circumstances, I could become a circumstance. And as I could thrust myself out into the market, be causative instead of being at effect, and rather than accommodating conditions, I could establish conditions, verbally and otherwise, that people may, statistically at least, accommodate. You know, it's a real a psychic shift, I call it, but it was so important. because 90 days later, I was #1 internationally with the same company. Now, same product, same price, same city, same car, same wife. Notice all the denominators were the same, except that I had a different perspective on who I'd become. That was causative, as I say, instead of being at effect. Somehow, I captured some, not all, but at least a portion of my initiative. I accepted some of my authority. Rather than walking around with my hat in my hand, I began to go out with expectations instead of hope. You know what I mean? In other words, there was a different, it's kind of like a fine difference. I call it psychic posturing. It's a difference, and you can feel this, I know, of bracing yourself to walk into a room full of people. You know, that can be kind of overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Or to have a room full of people, have you walk into it. See, it's all how we posture our mind in the moment just before it happens. Now, it's kind of like going in as a host or going in as a guest, going in as a leader, going in as a participant. See, that's a little choice we can make in our head that makes all the difference in the outcome that can occur.
Vern, I think this is so important, and I want to ask you 2 questions, and I think we ought to spend just a moment on it for our viewers. How do we, as viewers, get to the point where we see ourselves clearly in the responding mode that you say 95% of us are in most of the time? How do we get to see ourselves clearly as just responding to conditions? Things happen and we respond. Someone throws a baseball at you, you catch it because it's an automatic response. It's something you just do. Our boss yells at us and we get upset. Someone says no, we accept no as an answer.
Okay, may I suggest too that it's a reaction? A response is a purposeful, intellectual thing based on love. Okay. And we'll get to that later on in maybe future shows. But yeah, our natural tendency is to react because the subconscious mind is the dictatorial mind, if you would, until the mind catches on and makes it the other way around. See, usually we're pretty subject to our subconscious mind. My first day, for example, my subconscious was totally in control. And it says, we don't do this. We've never done this before. You're going to get killed out here.
Keep driving.
Don't
get out of that car. It's dangerous out there.
Yeah, because we'll find out in subsequent weeks that when you go into a fear mode, you're going to do one of 3 things. Either fight, which I flipped into in the final moments of that first day, or you're going to flee, which I was certainly doing a lot of, and I was frozen behind the wheel. And see, that's 2 out of 3, flee and freeze. Okay, and it wasn't until I went into a fight mode that I actually acted. Okay, and even though I had to sublimate that agitation, at least it put me out there in the front line. And I've recognized in subsequent years, I mean, it took me 20 or 30 to recognize it, that most sales training, most sales languaging and perspectives is based on the fight mode, on the aggressive side, because it's harder to teach people how to sell with love. You know what I mean? They're going to be fearful anyway, so let's work on the fear. And this is one of the things we've changed over the years. And I've developed a language and a perspective and a style that makes selling so much more comfortable for the seller and for the consumer and for the industry. And we've made that difference out here.
So you think that in order to become more aware of whether we are reacting or responding, because you said there's a difference, what can we do? Can we make a list of things we do each day that are just automatic, or how do we become aware of that? Because, you know, it's a habit that's so ingrained in us.
Thank you for clinging to that thing too, because I would go past it, because I tend, I think, sometimes to take it for granted. You know what I mean? It's such a part of me now. It's association. In other words, it's the idea of you've got to read, attend seminars, associate with people who are making it, and you might pick up the idea. For example, someone watching us this evening might be going, oh, I think I've been doing that. But if they hadn't heard it before, how long could it go? A whole lifetime.
Indefinitely.
Yeah, a whole lifetime. So it's a matter of, it's kind of like...
but you know, even if you hear an idea, what are the chances that you're going to remember it tomorrow and catch yourself? And
that's why I say associate.
You know what?
Associate.
I'm reacting.
Yeah, that's why I say associate. You've got to get... It's kind of like if you read a book with those ideas in it, you got to read the book again and again. If you go to a seminar that says it, you got to go to the seminar again and again. Tell you one thing that's contributing to a lot of people's forward movement is the sales industry at large. For example, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people are getting into multi-level marketing, network marketing, for example, and being exposed to some of these ideas for the very first time in their lives. Now, a lot of them don't make any money, but their lives are enriched. You know what I mean? If they would just recognize that they begin to perceive things differently and start moving forward, that could make a big difference.
Because it's really changing the whole way they think and their philosophy about themselves and their lives.
Now, I will grant you that I haven't heard many speakers nor read many books that delve into this as deeply as we have. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that I had so much difficulty, that my understanding and my breakthrough was so meaningful to me that I made a career out of it. Because I recognize that everyone, I mean, I've recruited over the years thousands of people, and most of them couldn't budge. You know what I mean? But a few of them got it. You know what I mean? A few of them go, whoa, now I understand. It's like here in Sacramento, I've got salespeople who have multiplied their sales volumes 300% and 400% because they recognize this one thing. Rather than being dysfunctional, they became functional. Just by recognizing it and saying, okay, now I can practice, at least I'm aware. Now, you're not always going to be on top of it. I think there is a tendency that extraneous forces can cause us to slip back occasionally, but once you know, you know. You know what I mean? You can always wait a day and kind of muster your courage and start again, where a lot of people never even get started. You follow what I'm saying? But it is an important... I'll tell you another thing that came out of this, too. That by the time I got up here at number 1, I recognized something I never would have known if I hadn't made the journey. And that was that by the time I got to be around 900th, it was the same thing as being at 100.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, tricky, isn't it? If a person could understand this, I think more of them would move forward, would initiate, would maybe make some commitments, become convicted about something, because this is fascinating. Let me say it again. By the time I had gone from 1200 to 900, I recognized later that it was the same thing as being at 100. In other words, I didn't have to go all this way. What happened is that I recognized later, and a person would never realize this, they haven't taken the journey, but looking back, you realize that when you hit this level, you step into a milling mass, a melee, if you would, of mediocrity. In other words, people settling, people meeting their quotas, making a living, getting by, staying out of trouble. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, just milling around out here. For example, the salesperson or the businessman whose business is up here today might be down here tomorrow, and this person that's here will be here. There's that shuffling, that milling around. And what you can go into is the fact that now that you have your momentum, recaptured some of your initiative, recognize that you have authority and accepted your esteem, which is has to do with it, that when you step into here, you have this psychic secret again that over there, maybe over there, there's a door that you can walk through into excellence. And you can hang out in here just as long as you want to, by the way. You can hang out there for a day, a week, a decade. Yeah, yeah, because no one's going to notice.
They're all there.
Yeah, they're all there, so they don't even know. Good old boy. Good old boy just getting by. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not, these people up here are aware of it, you know, but just to know that, and what I'm really saying is that I recognize that there was no ladder to success. You've ever heard that expression, ladder of success? Bad languaging. So that's the beginning of what we are about.
What is it, a trampoline?
Plateaus. Well, trampoline's a good idea because it gets you to the next plateau. Yeah, a ladder of success does something to our mind and our heart, if you would, that if there had been a ladder of success here, I couldn't have done this in 90 days. In other words, down here you'd have to go 1,200, 1,100, 1,009, 800, 700, 605. You know what I mean? That's a long way, but it really even isn't that good. What happens in our subconscious mind is 1,200, 1,199, 1,198, 1,197, 1,196. After a while, it's easy to settle, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, one step at a time. You know, they tell us these things, our motivational speakers and what have you, but sometimes it backfires on us. I can remember things that I've heard that are no longer true. It's kind of like Earl Nightingale. I love his record, The Strangest Secret. I mean, I listened to that thing probably 200 times and integrated it. But there was one thing he said on there, for example. He was quoting Marcus Aurelius, I believe, And he said that a man becomes what he thinks about all day long. You know what I mean? And I know that's not true because I'd probably be a girl. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah, right.
But you know what I mean? But I know what he's talking about, that if indeed you want to accomplish something, you've got to get focused and thinking about it and visualize its completion, and you got to set those sights, and you got to be serious, and you got to get active, and you got to do, and you got to examine what you're doing, and you got to do a little bit better, and you got to get serious about it.
So what's the difference between mediocrity and excellence? What's the real difference?
I think it's conviction, acceptance, letting yourselves, that's purposely plural, know that it's okay. It's okay to go for it.
Believing that it's possible for you?
Oh, possible, even probable. See, in this journey, one thing that Ben Sweetland had talked about, we've talked about it on the show, is affirmations. Down here, I was convincing myself of the possibilities by saying, I can be the #1 field counselor in the United States. And I said it over and over, I can be, you know. I can be the #1, I can be #1. And as I gained some momentum, right up in here somewhere, right around 900, I said, I will be. You know, in other words, if I keep doing this, okay, there's no reason. I will be #1. And when I did that, I leaped from here to here. And then soon I was able to say, what? I am #1. Now, then I had to satisfy myself with being among the best. You know, to maintain that position #1, everybody's after you. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so after a while, it's not that you satisfy yourself, but you recognize other people's, the excellence that they have, and you honor them, and you let that be okay. Yeah, there's quite a story here. Perhaps we can continue with it next week, if you like, in order to clarify why we're even here on television and what our motive is, what we're really up to, and in some cases I think we've accomplished. But in the interim, we're going to have to say that this is Life Talk. Life Talk. And if they'd like to call in, it's 916-366-8749. That's if you're in Sacramento area. And on a national basis, it's 800-661-3490. And my name is Byrne
Moses.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Vern.